blew it. I blew it. I blew the intro. Good evening. I blew the intro officially. Winston says hi. It's so cold outside. It's so cold that the dog has to warm my ears by nibbling on my earlobe. You know people are watching, Winston, right? Okay, down you go. Oi! Good evening, everyone. How goes the battle? For anybody who is... My wife said in today's video, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I went to Walmart, Canadian Tire, shopping centers because Quebec has now started implementing the vaccine passport for big box retailers in the province with more than 1,500 square meters surface area. And I went to document it. Now, I take for granted everybody watching has seen the, progressive growth of the hair, the beard, the overall demeanor. But Marion is concerned that if someone did not ever meet me and had never met me before, and that was the first video they saw, that I might look like a crazy person running around with a camera, yelling at a camera with a face mask that is half my face. And, But yeah, the poop has hit the fan in Quebec, and it's absolutely over the top. It's, if you haven't seen the Viva on the street from last night talking about what's going on in Quebec, today I went to Canadian Tire and was, I said, I'm not showing you papers to go into a damn retail store. No, I'm not doing it. And I just wanted to document it. I went to Walmart, which was a drive from my house, because I saw on the interwebs, there was a tweet going around that in Walmart, because they have a pharmacy and they can't deny the unvaccinated access to a pharmacy, because this is all scientific, that they had designed these little plexiglass cubicles that the unvaccinated or those not willing to show papers would be relegated to until such time as they were escorted to the pharmacy and back out without the ability to buy anything else in the store. And I had to go document it. It's possible that image was from a Costco and not from a Walmart. I didn't see the cubicles or the little plexiglass receptacles, but the manager of the store did say, if you don't show papers, you're not coming in. And I said, well, you have a pharmacy here. I want to get some Tylenol. Go watch it. It's just, thank you. It's beautiful. I love the white streaks. When I was a kid, I used to streak my hair. So I'd go to the hair place. They would put that plastic bag on with the holes in it, tease out the hair, bleach it, then wash it, then remove it, and I would have these beautiful streaks. Now it's God streaking my hair gray. Okay, enough of the rambling nonsense. Super chat. Don't worry, Viva. The deeper you get into RFK Jr.'s book, the that's another thing. I started listening to that on audiobooks. It's enraging. The statistics in the beginning of the book as to the long-term consequences of the lockdowns themselves and not COVID is enough to make you appreciate why certain parties have been the traditional purveyors of discriminatory policies that have a disparate impact on vulnerable communities. And these are the same people always yapping away that how they're protecting vulnerable communities. Okay, with that said, I just want to make sure I can read this. Apathy will be the death of our society. Just doing our jobs. That vlog from today will stand as a testament that at least someone was doing something about the mess. Stay safe and thanks. It is disheartening, and I'm not there to pick fights with the employees. We're going to get into all of this tonight, so let me just get to one. Did not mean to bring that one up. Okay. Shout out to Convoy to Ottawa 2022. Be wary of people who will try to cause riots during this time. Convoy to Ottawa will not be a Democrat January 6th. Okay, so standard disclaimers. No legal advice, no medical advice, no undermining election fortification device, yada, yada, yada. Super chats, YouTube takes 30%. If you don't like it, we are simultaneously streaming on Rumble. Rumble takes 20% for their Rumble rants, same type of thing. So you can feel better supporting Rumble, yada, yada. Another way to support us, on Locals. vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Tonight is not a sidebar. Tonight is a guest whom I met I forget how we met on the Twitterverse. We're going to have to rehash how we became Twitter friends. And I did a podcast with him last week, and we're talking, and it's nice to be the one being asked the questions, because it's always nice talking about yourself. But I'm thinking halfway through this podcast with him, it's like, I got a lot of questions for Clifton. I'm going to mix up because it's Clifton Duncan, and I keep saying Duncan Clifton. Clifton Duncan, on his Twitter handle, and I forget how we became connected, describes himself as a dissident liberal. And we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it because I can do that. We're going to get into it because I'm going to ask him the same question I asked Dershowitz. When does a liberal officially say either I am no longer liberal or I am no longer considered liberal by those who consider themselves liberal? That is going to be the punchline of the discussion for tonight. But he's a very interesting guy, an actor. Chiseled. I shouldn't say this. I saw some videos on YouTube. Chiseled, and you'll see from his jawbone, chiseled. Great voice. And from what I can see, having worked in an industry that has traditionally certain ideological political leanings, having watched him on Twitter and having gotten to know him, I said on Twitter today, I think we've gone through something of a similar transition. So we're going to do this now. This is not a sidebar. This is a discussion, although there might be some sidebar cross-examination. Viva, why is no one calling out the sexism of Brandon, calling the reports? Oh, no, they love it. They love it. We're going to get into all of this. Okay. And has Clifton been able to stay? Okay, see, good question, Matthew Hammond. And Clifton, we're gonna ask you this when you come in here. But first, without further ado, people, I may not take too many super chats and comments because it might be more distracting than I'd like it to be. But Clifton, with all that said, sir, how goes the battle?
It's going, man. It's going. How you doing, man?
Okay, this is good. I suspect a lot of people viewing may not know who you are. Now, I've tried to look you up online to find scandals, to find controversy, to find something to, what's the word when you ambush someone with? And I'm joking totally, but I try to do some research on you. I know you better than a lot of people watching, I suspect, on my channel in particular. Elevator pitch as to who you are before we really get into how you became who you are.
Sure. I am now a mediocre Twitter personality, but before that, I was an actor, working my way up. I went to a fancy schmancy conservatory. I spent 10 years building my career, working at some of the best theaters across the United States. Before I hunkered down in New York, I made my Broadway debut in 2017, went on to some high-profile productions and shows off-Broadway, began to break into television, began to break into television. My career was on the way up, and then the whole world ended. And then I'm someone who has great difficulty keeping my mouth shut about things. And it's literally physically impossible for me to just stop talking about these kinds of things. And now I'm in Atlanta. I left New York after I saw that Andrew Cuomo was going to destroy the city, and I left. And now I'm in Atlanta and I'm stuck. And someone asked the question if I'm doing any work in Atlanta right now, and the answer is no, because all of the major production companies, which would be casting, out of New York anyway, or LA, they're requiring that you get the needle, which I do not want to get. I see no medical necessity for it. And at this point, I don't want to be bullied into doing something I don't want to do, which is irreversible. So I'm sort of stuck in this limbo of not knowing whether or not I have a career or will return to it, or if I'm just out of the industry for good. So that's where I'm at.
If you're going to find a new career that might be more rewarding and better in all respects. If I may ask the impolite question, how old are you?
I am 39.
Well, you're well hiding your age, 39-year-old. So from what I saw online, at least on IMBD, you were born in Heidelberg, Germany?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So when people ask me where I grew up, I tell them Germany, Virginia, Belgium, and Virginia in that order. Then I spent 15 years in New York City.
So what did that mean? How do you come to be born? First of all, do you speak German?
9.
Okay.
It's
Although
always disappointing to answer when people ask that question, like, "Oh, he's so worldly," and he's like, "No, he doesn't know anything."
well, I would say
Stuff
we
like
might
that.
see some humorous references to German in the chat tonight. But so, I mean, how did you come to be born in Germany? Were your parents in the military? Were they ambassadors?
Yeah, so my mother was in the army, so yeah, she was stationed there, and then we, at the age of 4, we moved to southeastern Virginia, which is a separate animal from Northern Virginia. So Northern Virginia, that's where the sort of DC, Washington DC power, what can you say, sort of power center is. Arlington, Alexandria, DC Metro, that place up there. So that's not where I was growing up. Although I did spend a couple of years there. It's a great DC is a great theater town, but again, art is dying, dead and dying right now because of everything going on.
So you're born in Germany. Your mother's in the military. Your father?
Oh, who knows? I'm one of those sad statistics of Black American males who grew up without a father. So that is always a sore spot, but it is what it is, and that's a whole other discussion about that.
Well, you'll tell me when I push too far. I actually, we might get back into this, but logistically, actually, then, first of all, how many siblings? Any other siblings, or just you?
Yeah, I have a younger brother. He's 10 years younger.
So, I mean, logistically, how do you come to be in Germany? Like, does your mother go to Germany as part of the military after your father has left? No, you're born in Germany.
So the story, as I have it, is that she enlisted when she was 19. She stayed in for 17 years, and then when we were in Belgium, this was when I was prepubescent years, 8 through 12. That's how old I was, and they were going to send her to like Bosnia or Beirut or something like that, and she was like, "No, I have 2 kids." I'm gonna get out. So we actually ended up moving back into the house that we lived in previously before we left, before we moved out of Virginia, which was interesting and heartbreaking when I got back because everyone either left or they'd forgotten who I was. So that was a bit of much more of a culture shock than normal.
Okay, and I'm going to pry a little bit because I'm these things I've always been. I find it interesting. Did you ever know your father, or was he gone from birth?
I have a picture of him, and oddly enough, he's wearing a hat just like the one that I'm wearing right now, and it's something that happened completely organically. And it was funny. My first year of conservatory, my fancy smancy conservatory, I showed a picture to my class, my teacher at the time, and she said, "Wow, it's like looking at you in like a mirror image of you," which is really interesting. I would like to find him at some point. And I don't have any animus toward him. Just let him know like what I'm up to and what I'm doing.
And did he have a troubled life, or was it just a abandonment type thing for no other reason?
I don't know, man. It's one of those things where and my mother is very tight-lipped about it. It's one of the reasons that our relationship isn't the greatest right now. But it seems to me, she was 24 and, passion, according to my uncle, who passed the last year, unfortunately. But, I was a child of love. So that's, I at least got that going for me.
And now, I mean, growing up, your mother's raising 2 kids alone. First of all, what type of, I'm loading the question. I presume your mother worked extremely hard and you have like a tremendous amount of admiration for what she did to raise you and your brother. What is that childhood like? And do you have any resentment towards not having a father or not having grown up with one, and towards other families that had, called it what's the word I'm looking for? A nuclear type family, functional nuclear type family.
Oh God. Yeah. It is difficult because growing up, I would wonder why it is that I didn't have the sort of warm, fuzzy feelings that a lot of people, that other people seem to have for their own mothers. And I realized that there was a lot of resentment and rage there. After about a year of therapy, I began to draw the connections between how I am now and my upbringing. But the thing is that, for me this year, it's going to be a year of healing, and you have to forgive people. And of course, the older that we get, the more we understand our parents and what they were going through. So I understand that I have to mend that relationship. It is a hole in my life. But going back to your question, I do feel like, and this sort of gets into why I am not a fan of people who exalt single motherhood or say that it's the greatest thing ever, especially among Black communities, because I feel as though I'm playing catch up. There's a great comedian named Patrice O'Neill who sadly is no longer with us, but he passed about 2009. He's this big, loquacious, like 6'4", 300-pound dude, and you can find hours and hours and hours of his material on the internet, and he had really, really fascinating views about the relationships between men and women, and he said that at one point, for instance, he talked about not feeling resentment about his father, abandoning his mother, and he said, I could have been a sock. He's like, I'm basically, I get it. It's I was a squirt, but he said something in one interview where he said, I feel like I'm learning everything 10 years too late. And that's often what I feel like outside of everything else. I mean, I made I made my life extraordinarily difficult just by entering the field that I was in. And, look at what I'm doing with my life now, obviously. But I think a lot of those obstacles were made all the more difficult. And in terms of resentment, it's not resentment. It's more envy, because most of the well-adjusted people that I've met in my life have had their mother and father as a part of their lives. And especially with men, I hear often, well, my father taught me this, my father taught me that, my father told me this, and this is something my dad told me, my dad taught me. And so I've had to use a bunch of disparate sources in order to find that sort of male leadership, which is really important. I mean, when I've done shows, and some theaters you work at, you can go, they have like programs where they have relationships with schools in the area. And, like I was in Baltimore, for instance. And for those who know, for those in America, Baltimore is a very, very deeply troubled city. And so I went to this one school, and, there was this class, so it was full of Black boys. And, they were at risk, as I call them. And I could see them as I was speaking. They had seen me in the show, and the show I was doing was this play called The Rivals, which is this old 18th century British comedy. And so they're like, who is this Black guy who is using this, British accent and like doing this comedy, and like who? And I could see that they wanted to connect in some way. Like their eyes were just, they were interested in me and looking for something. And I felt like my heart kind of went out to them because I understood what they were looking for. So it's not that I feel resentment. I can't be resentful towards people that had something that I didn't, but there is a lot of envy there. My resentment is toward my mother, but I have to let that go, because it's just not healthy to hang on to that kind of stuff.
Now, the question the question about the upbringing, did you have intermittent father figures or just devoid of father figures whatsoever?
Well, at various points in my life, I've found great people. Like I've got some people now that they're. I think one of the cool things about being a guy, it always seems like there's someone who's 20 years older who tells you that you're a baby, like no matter what age you're at. So when I was 30, 31 years old, I was at a gym, doing some warm-ups. It was like calisthenics or whatever. And this guy comes over. He's like, "Hey man, you into boxing or something?" I was like, No, I'm just, I'm warming up. He's like, "Oh, really? Oh, and he said, "Do you ever think about boxing?" Which I have, actually, which is funny. But I said, "No, I feel like maybe I'm too old." He's like, "How old are you?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm 31. He goes, "What? Man, you a baby. I'm 50 years old." And but there's always been someone like that that I could call to, and like I said, there's the internet. You have all kinds of outlets and to seek advice. Although that actually can go another rabbit hole, because then you discover things like what's called the Manosphere and like sort of red pill philosophy. And in this context, I'm using the term red pill. Like some people use the term red pill to mean, well, you're aware of the lies of the left. But in terms of the Manosphere, being red pilled means you understand the true nature of women. But oftentimes I think that sort of, and I went down that rabbit hole for a long time, and there is some great stuff about like self-improvement and that kind of a thing, but I think it's also potentially a place where a lot of lost, wayward young men are getting a lot of really bad advice as far as how to build great relationships and just uh, how to be great humans. So that stuff can really kind of make you cynical and nihilistic if you pay too much attention to it, and frankly angry. So at the same time, I found that the more I speak up and the more that I am true to myself, I find really great people.
Well, it is. I'm going to bring this one up, which is who threw the pupe? The poop. Keep up the great work. People love what you do. Thank you. It is. It's an interesting thing. Like we've had discussions with people, and we've overlapped with issues of the manosphere. We had.
Mm.
Oh, I'm going to forget her name. Son of a gun. Now I feel really bad. I'm just blanking on the name, and I'm going to have to. Son of a gun. I'm going to have to do this because I feel ashamed that I have forgotten Karen Strong, for goodness sake. Karen Strong.
Karen Strong. Yeah.
So we had her on as a sidebar. We discussed these things, and it's an interesting thing. I see it in some of the subject matter that we cover. Like it pokes its head when you're talking about family law issues and people. I'd say it's red pilled versus black pilled, and I think that's the distinction between being awakened and becoming nihilistic, which is the system's broken and it's always out to get, and therefore burn the system down.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's the line to walk, is that sometimes your eyes get open, but if they get closed again to darkness, then it's almost not good to have them open in the first place. But you're growing up now. You're growing up without a father. Is your like adolescenthood relatively normal? You're in school and then you get into acting? Like how did that look?
Well, I mean, I've said recently that my life makes no sense. Nothing about my life really makes sense. Although people will say that their own lives, or none of our lives truly make sense, especially right now. But no, every 3 to 4 years, I had a complete and total upheaval in my life. So when I was 12, we moved from Belgium. Now, mind you, I was literally dragged across the pond, kicking and screaming, to Belgium. But then by the time I was, I'd spent some time there. I didn't want to leave. And, but then when I came back, as I mentioned before, to Virginia, a lot of the kids that I'd known had moved away, or they'd completely forgotten who I am. Matter of fact, one anecdote, there was one kid that I was huge friends with when I was about 9 or 10. I want to say his name. We called him Montague. I don't know why we called him Montague, but I think his real name was Dominique, or something like that. But I think his 10th birthday party, he lived up the street from me. So I went to his house and ate a bunch of pizza and cake, and I just threw up all over his bathroom. And his poor dad had to clean up all that nonsense. But he and I were very, very close. And when I moved back to Virginia, this was 8th grade for me, a year before I started high school. And, it was towards the end of the year. And I remember just bumping into this kid, and I looked at him and I was like, oh my God, it's Montague. And, we're growing up, we're adolescents at this point, and he's got more manly features. I was always younger than puke stories are the greatest. I was always like I started school a year early, so I was always kind of smaller and younger than most of the other kids in class. But I noticed that he had matured, and we bumped into each other, just hard bump. And he looks at me, he goes, "Yeah, sorry, kid," and then he just moves on. He had no recollection of me whatsoever. So it was multiple kind of experiences like that where I just that was kind of tough. And then the pattern continued, because then in high school, so you make all your friends in junior high, I guess that would be the equivalent. Then you go to high school and you meet your friends there, but then you all go away to college, and then you make your friends there. And then then I left and went to I was in DC for a bit, but then I went to New York. And so the cycle keeps changing. And then as an actor, you actually spend a lot of time on your own, and spend a lot of time moving around. You're gigging across the country. You disappear for months at a time, and you're not home. So, and then you think about actors, and you're working on these shows. You work really, really close with people, and we're supposed to be open-hearted and innocent and childlike. That's part of our job to be so. which is why you see actors saying so many stupid, really ridiculous things. But they're very earnest, but that's just part of the job. But you get really close to people, and then the gig is over, the show closes, or the shoot ends, you wrap, and that's it. So then you move on. So it's been a very sort of chaotic life, and trying to find some kind of peace of mind within all of that, I think is a great challenge for me right now, which is compounded by lots of things happening in the world.
So let's now we'll get into career, and then we're going to get into politics, because it's going to work its way in there. Career-wise, I mean, for anybody out there who might have seen you, like, where would people have seen you if they're going to see you somewhere not being into? Where might people have seen you? Is the simpler question.
Here and there. The bulk of my work has been concentrated in theater, and in 2017 I debuted on Broadway in a show called The Play That Goes Wrong. Which is a popular show in London. It was created by this troupe of actors who just wanted something to do, so they wrote the show for themselves, and they put it on, I think, in some pub somewhere, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And it's basically a farce. And the concept of the show is that you have this troupe of actors. So you have the actors who are playing people who are actors. And then the people who are playing actors themselves are playing characters in a really, really bad mystery play. And the conceit of the show, I mean, it literally is the play that goes wrong. I mean, the show, the name of the show is the show. So everything that can conceivably go wrong in the show does. And it's just great slapstick, really, really sophisticated, sort of lowbrow here and there, completely apolitical. Just brilliant show, very, very funny. And J.J. Abrams, who people know from Star Wars, Star Trek as well, and mixed opinions on him, but they have mixed opinions. I think he's a cool dude, but he saw the show and said, I want to produce this, and they put it up on Broadway with the original British cast, and then they brought in an American cast after 6 months. And I was part of that American cast. So we were the first American cast to do the show. And at a certain point, it was really cool because I had this billboard right smack dab in the middle of Times Square with the cast on it. And it was, me and one of my castmates, Mark, were in the front of it. So I'm like, dude, every time I got off the N train, the subway, you're squeezing through this crowd of people, and it's annoying. Anyone who lives in New York, they avoid Times Square unless they work there. No one wants to go to Times Square because it's always so goddamn packed. But every day, you get to look up and see yourself, on this billboard, which is really, really cool. And then after that, I had to leave the show due to an injury. But then my career kind of took another turn. I'm also a singer, so I was working on my singing, and I began to distinguish myself. As they say, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So my background is kind of interesting in that I'm classically trained, in that Shakespeare, Greek tragedy, the heightened language, the classic dramatic literature. I'm trained to do that, but I also have this singing voice. And so I began to distinguish myself as a top actor, sort of in the Broadway community, and so on and so forth, which is not easy to do. And so I began moving up and up and up. And then when the work in the theater dried up, again, I began to move into television. So I did some guest stars in a couple of shows. Probably the most prominent one and the coolest one was NCIS New Orleans, where I got to act with, do some scenes with Scott Bakula, who I loved because I watched Quantum Leap as a kid. And, that was pretty awesome. I did a show called Bluff City Law, which was canceled, but I got to act with Jimmy Smits, and it's just, I was like on my way, essentially. And, getting nominated for awards, and, there was one point where I had an agent, I had a manager, and I had a publicist. It was just one of those things where it was like, okay, this is happening and it's time. And anyone can Google me, my reviews are out there. 90% of them are positive. New York Times citations several times. LA Times, Entertainment Weekly. So if anyone tries to say that, I don't have it or I failed, no, I didn't fail. I was succeeding brilliantly.
This is where it's going to take. This was not going to be an interview, a discussion about acting. We have to lay the brickwork in order to actually get into this transition. Because I say transition, or rather metamorphosis, however you want to put it. So, so everyone's going to appreciate this now. We're working our way in slowly, and then we're going to get into it. This is 2017. You're in a sort of not a I won't say a niche field of acting, but you're not in Hollywood. You're in a different field of the arts, making it. At the time, I mean, I don't know politics when it started playing a role in Hollywood. I remember it being a role or being a part of Hollywood from the beginning. Oscar night, you always had your political speeches. Everyone always knew the politics was baked into the product, but no one really cared about it so long as the product was good enough.
Yeah.
What was it like 2017? And was it crazy then? Did it get crazy earlier, or did it just fall off the cliff? And if it did, when?
Well, you know, it started a long, long time ago. There's an interview with John Wayne from, I don't know when it was, but obviously since it's John Wayne, it's a long time ago. And he basically was talking about how the commies are taking over Hollywood. And it wasn't a problem for a long time. And but we mentioned 2017. What happened the year before in 2016? Donald Trump was elected to the presidency of the United States. And, you know, I would say I was red pilled by about 2014. One specific incident in particular, which which made internet history, and I think was a really say what?
Go on right now. Which 2014? I'm trying to think of what it was. What was it?
You probably wouldn't know. It's really, really nerdy shit. So in August of 2014, and there's no way I'll be able to explain all of it in a short amount of time because it was so convoluted. But a controversy came to be known as Gamergate. Emerged.
Oh, we talked about this at length on the. Please go ahead. Yes, I forget her name now. Anita
Sarkeesian. Anita Sarkeesian. But she was sort of ancillary to the whole thing. But essentially what happened is that this independent game developer was accused of. Oh my gosh, am I going to go into this?
Well, you won't actually have to go into too much detail because everybody watching is going to be relatively familiar. But for those who may not be, 30,000-foot overview.
So there was a programmer who made this blog post called the the Zoe Post, and it was this really long, heart-wrenching, detailed blog post about the complete dumpster fire that was his relationship with this woman named Zoe Quinn, who happened to be an independent game developer. And you know, the details of their relationship. So it started out kind of as a sex scandal, and so that was kind of interesting. And I saw this video. I just happened to be there at the moment in time where someone made a video about it, and then it got pulled down. And then when that video got pulled down, it was like a false DMCA claim. And then this other internet person named Internet Aristocrat made this video called The Quinspiracy. And it ended up getting like 1 million views, but it went down. It started this whole snowball effect where I think it was a straw that broke the camel's back. And it was really a starting point, I think, in a lot of the culture wars that we see now. But that, for me, that was a moment where I began, because what happened is that people began talking about this, obviously, because they were tired of, they wanted to talk about what was going on in this guy's relationship because it was just juicy and salacious. But then all these message boards were kind of censoring discussion, you know, even if you had reasonable questions, and, you know, her relationships with different with different journalists were at issue. And then it just kept snowballing outward and outward and outward into a bigger story, because the thing is, you know, it wasn't just a consumer revolt. It wasn't just about, you know, denouncing feminism or keeping women out of gaming, which is what it was painted as. What it was that a bunch of people who play video games, you know, which is their hobby, and I was into it because, you know, I like video games. It became, wait a minute, why are we talking about all this political stuff? Why is it when I go to this video game website, I'm reading about patriarchy and like racial justice? I want to know when the games are coming out. Do the controls work? Are the graphics good? And what's coming out next? You know what I mean? So essentially that's when what happened was that I saw a couple of things that I began to notice about the sort of left-wing point of worldview, or how they operate. So you had these journalists who were acting as gatekeepers. They would not allow any story that was negative about Zoe Quinn well, there's her name now. I shouldn't use it. I'll call her literally who. That's what they ended up calling her.
Everybody knew who it was anyhow, but yeah.
But so, so there were gatekeeping stories. So you couldn't talk about it. They were censoring any sort of discussion about it. Any minorities that said, hey, wait, I agree with these people, were just completely ignored or slandered or dismissed. You may be sensing a pattern here. And so I really got sort of and then I saw what was actually going on, and I saw how it was being reported on in the mainstream press, and the divergence between what it was really about and what it was reported to be about was so vast that I said, wait a minute, this is crazy. This is literally crazy. And so when I talk about my red pilling, that's what I mean, is that I noticed how people on the left who claim to be advocates and champions of people who look like me would immediately either dismiss you or condescend to you. That was the worst thing too. People would say stuff to me like, you don't know what you're getting into. These are bad faith actors, as if I don't have a mind of my own. Like, do I sound like a moron to you? If this was really some kind of neo-Nazi, like far right movement, why would I even be, a part of this or supporting these people? I wouldn't. I have the self-awareness to say, yeah, that's not really me. Like I told you before we went on air, I've been to 4chan. I've seen what goes on there. It's kind of rough. You can't scroll more than two posts without seeing some N-bombs, So I recognize what that is, but the way that it became reported on and how it became mainstream was so fascinating. And so by the time Donald Trump got into office, I already knew about fake news, so to speak, because I saw secondhand how I was being talked about as some sort of like angry, privileged white male who was angry about women in video games. And, I was into comic books. I was into video games, nerd culture as a kid. Nobody, and I mean nobody, ever said, hey, darky, get out of here. We don't want your jigaboos, messing with ours. No one ever said that to me. It was always about the shared interest in a single hobby. And then you have these idiot 20-somethings who are writing these articles about how gaming and comics are these racist, exclusive, as opposed to inclusive cultures. And I'm saying to myself, these people have no clue what they're talking about. They're either stupid or they're lying. And so then 2016 comes along, Trump is elected. And then here's the thing. I'm doing a show in Washington, D.C. In Connecticut at the time. Hartford, Connecticut has a rather large Black population. I think it's Jamaican descent. And the show I was doing, the theater paid for our haircuts. And this guy, he had the gift of gab, man. He was such a hustler. He knew how to talk, but his story was so fascinating. He was this dude. His dad was a farmer in Jamaica, had a third grade education, but knew how to do math and knew how to work hard. And, it was just a fascinating story. But then this Black guy was the first person who ever told me that he was going to vote for Donald Trump. And his friend sitting, there with him was just saying, was nodding his head and smiling and saying, yeah. And this barber's concern was Trump's going to make it so that we can make some money. So this barber's concerns were purely economic. And then I would go to the YMCA and exercise there. And the white guys there, you know what they were talking about? Jobs and the economy. So right away, I said, there's something greater going on here, because then I go to rehearsal and hang out with these other actors. And they would say stuff like, if anyone votes for Trump, then
I don't even want to finish the sentence, but Biden said it. Then you ain't Black. I mean, and in a stereotypical way to say it, in a denigrating way, in a demeaning way, in a way that he knows better for the community than the community knows for itself. I mean, I don't know how people get over that.
Well, it's bigger than that, really, because there was such animus about it. And but they would say like, unfriend me now and yada, yada, yada. So, the typical sort of left-wing line of Trump is a racist. And by the way, nobody thought Donald Trump has been a public figure for over 4 decades. This man has been on Oprah. This man cameoed on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This man went to WWE and all that. He had a hit TV show for like 14, 15 years. And all that time, nobody ever came out. Well, maybe some people did, and said he was a racist. I'm sure he did. But he's literally winning awards alongside Muhammad Ali and Rosa Parks.
Yeah, the Ellis Island Award, I believe, which they said was for brotherhood. It wasn't for actual racial tolerance. I mean, because it's amazing. You're in the community that is experiencing this. I am watching it. I'm from a different community. I think demographically, both of our respective communities tend to vote liberal and Democrat with the same relative percentages for whatever the reason. But you're in this community. You see it in real time. An individual who, until he decided to run against the Democrats, was never called racist in any meaningful sense. And now you're seeing it. And if you don't feel this too, then you get belittled within the community or denigrated by people outside of the community to say you don't even know what's good for yourself.
And see, here's the thing, because I had learned by that point to just shut up. And it wasn't that I was a hardcore pro-Trumper. My feelings about him were decidedly mixed. It's really funny because my feelings about Trump are mixed in an inverse fashion, in an inverse relation to how they were mixed about Barack Obama. So with Barack Obama, who I voted for once, I wasn't fooled again. I voted for him the first time in 2008. And look, whatever, people say, they say, oh, I love to hate somebody, but with Obama, I hate to love him, because I would see him on screen and I say, here's this, attractive, well-spoken, educated, charismatic. I remember his keynote speech from 2004. I think 2004 he gave this speech. And it was so electric and so powerful. And the thing about it is that maybe I'm kind of a weirdo, because I was in Washington, D.C. I'm about 21 years old. And the only radio station that would come into my car was C-SPAN. So I would listen to all these sort of call-in shows or whatever, but then these interviews would come up and I would hear Barack Obama, and I became sort of disillusioned, because the more I heard him speak, the more he began to sound like a politician to me. So even though I liked him, I was like, it sounds like kind of more the same old. And so when he was in office, and it was really, when he was elected, I was in the bar in New York City, a block away from my conservatory, Tisch School of the Arts, and it was announced he was elected. The whole bar erupted. I mean, the city of New York, it was electric. It was electric experience. I called my grandmother, and we're both crying on the phone, and because she was born in 1936. And and she died 2014, I think. So there's no way that she would ever have expected that a black man would be president. And so it was a very, very exciting time. And I think the historical significance can't be overlooked. It can't be denied. However, as a president, I was just not a fan. And the irony of it is, my critiques of him came from the far left at that time. So I would talk about, I read this outlet called the Black Agenda Report, for instance. And, they were just savaging Barack Obama. Glenn Greenwald, another person that I really admired and respected at the time, and still do. And now we're friends on Twitter. It's amazing. I've been following Glenn since 2005, but he was writing about this kind of stuff, and we elected Obama to be the anti-Bush, and yet he comes in office and he's
bushier than Bush in many senses.
In some ways. Right. So the broader point is that my feelings were mixed, because as the face of America, as a representative, visually, I said, this guy's great. He's got this beautiful black family. They're in the White House. It's great, beautiful daughters. He's funny. He's sort of, dry and cool. As a leader, not so much. So then Trump gets in the office. I'm like, dude, the optics of this are terrible. You know what I mean? He's got this slovenly appear. He's like he's sleazy. I'm sorry, man. He's sleazy. He's
Well,
just
I wouldn't call it
you know,
sleazy. I would call it unkempt would be the better word. Yeah, he's
sort of
brash.
garish. He's brash.
It would be yeah, like not. It's not sleazy because you don't think he's. I don't think he's trying to sell me a crappy used car and saying it's great. I think he's brash and he's
Right.
coarse and he's unfiltered. Is the way I would put it, for good and for bad.
And that's what people don't understand, about his appeal is that he's not a politician. He's not polished. Like the things about Trump that people didn't like about him were oddly enough the things that made him sort of effective in the minds of his supporters. I think Victor Davis Hanson made a great point. It's like all the people that you don't like him. But the thing about Trump is that I remember that third debate where Hillary Clinton was like, it's a good thing that somebody with your temperament, isn't in control of the White House or nuclear codes or isn't the president or whatever. And he looks dead at the camera and is like, because you'd be in jail. And he walks off. I was like, I was like, he said it. He just said it. And I remember him, as someone who I'm a student of behavior and psychology, to see him, Hillary Clinton was just this polished, very well rehearsed, very well prepared politician. But then Trump, who's like 6'2", 6'3" or something, is stalking around the stage. He's like a live wire. And he would just shoot from the hip. And he would just, you didn't know what he was going to do. And I was like, this guy is fascinating. But as time went on, I said, I appreciate that we have a president who will get up in front of a crowd and say, and this is probably my favorite Trump quote of his. He said, the Democrats and their ridiculous bullshit. I was like, oh, he said it. He said it. Oh, he says, we will never be a socialist country. That appeals to me. And so, again, I liked a lot of his policies in terms of, his economic savvy, the fact that he's, he's drone striking, which is unfortunate. And, he's doing arms deals and all the corrupt stuff. At the same time, he's not starting any new wars. You know what I mean? It's just,
he was actually having difficulty ending them because they were not telling him how many soldiers were in the countries in which they were having wars. I want to bring this chat up because it has 2 points that I actually want to get to. Not sure how anyone could think Obama is a good speaker. Swift Justice, I'm going to say this. He is a good speaker if you do not know what he's talking about. That's the issue. He check off all the boxes, is eloquent, has good pacing, has good enunciation. Yeah. But when you know that he's full of crap, it makes it impalatable to listen to what he has to say. My own personal experience. Yeah. Also, he is the first biracial president. This is the interesting thing. Let's not forget his mother and her family. This is the interesting thing where it's people's confirmation bias to some extent. When someone does something bad and they want to attribute it to identity, even if the person is half-half, they'll go to the half that allows them to draw negative inferences, stereotypes. When someone does something good, if they want to draw the good inferences, stereotypes from the good half, they'll ignore the other half. A lot of people said Obama was as much a white president as a black president because he was mixed race, and there's nothing wrong with that. Full stop. He was the first mixed race president, which in and of itself is a feat. Tell me this: like when people look at Obama and they say he was the first black president, what do you, Clifton, as an individual, say to the retort that he was as much white as he was black?
Well, yeah, the person makes a fair point, right? He's biracial. I ended up calling him the blackish president. There were these really weird conversations that were happening where I was like, some of these newspapers feel like they're out of the 1950s, back in like 2008, because there were discussions on the left and primarily the black left about, is Barack Obama black enough? And so for those who are outside of America, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but they have what's called, and it's racist. It's a racist concept, but they call it the one drop rule. So if you have just as much as one drop of black in you, then they call you black. So if your dad is black and your mom is white, then you're black.
Who's the they that calls you black for the one drop?
Black people. Okay. I would say Americans in general, actually. It's sort of ingrained into the culture. It's a very, people just say, oh, that person is black. So I think it's kind of changing now because of all of the identity stuff. Although I'm not sure people of color is, or Latinx whatever that is better. But you know, and as far as him speaking, it's funny that Thomas Sowell has this interview where he's played a clip of Barack Obama. And yes, whenever Barack was like sort of off teleprompter, then you would see him be like, when you have the you know, so fair enough. But he could give a great speech. And again, if you're at the point where I was in my life, where I was really ignorant about a lot of things, you know, again, it's very, very powerful. He has a soaring voice and you know, great speech writers. But you know, I think people glom onto the idea of him as the first Black president because of the history of the country, and it's such a powerful historic sort of a thing. But yeah, I mean, that is a totally fair point about you know, he is biracial. I wonder if the person who commented is sort of, I won't say resentful, but sort of prickly about the erasure of his white lineage.
There's a lot of people who are I would say prickly about it, but rather say it's a convenient thing to omit, because I'm going to just say what other people are saying and judge me for saying what other people are saying, because I've heard it, is that he's celebrated as the first Black president of the United States of America when he comes from a mixed race marriage and was raised by his white mother and raised in a white family because his father abdicated on parental duties. And so you're going to have a lot of people saying that's one heck of a way of celebrating the first Black president of the United States. But these are obviously not discussions anybody can have in any meaningful sense in public, because they will devolve into being called racist and whatever. That is a lot of people's critique of celebrating, lauding him as being the first Black president, given those family circumstances. For me, yes, he was mixed race, and it was an achievement, it was an accomplishment, and it was an accomplishment for him, because at the time, look, it took 8 years for people to find out that he was full of crap. And like, well,
some of us, it took less time, but
sorry, I didn't even bring this one up on purpose. I was going to make a joke about the one drop being Elizabeth Warren's defense. But no,
she had like 1/6000th or something of a drop.
1/1024th of a drop, but that's one drop back, Clifton. No, like Obama, he sounded good. He said all the right things, and then lo and behold, you know, into his presidency, gun running, extrajudicial killing, corruption with using the IRS to go. I mean, like if it were anyone else, I won't say they would have been in jail, but they would have been under the scrutiny of the media. But
he was so protected. To the extent that he was able to leave office, and people were saying with a straight face that he had a scandal-free presidency. Dude, so that is the most ridiculous load of shit I have ever heard.
It's a bald-faced lie. I'm not using the word the big lie, because that is a Hitlerian trope for anybody who doesn't appreciate it. It's just a bald-faced lie. Yeah. But say it enough, and people can say, well, scandal-free. My goodness. Eric Holder, gun running, Fast and the Furious, drone bombing citizens, IRS targeting Tea Party. To name a few.
He destroyed Libya. And people just were like, yeah, whatever. You know, or remember, I think we may have talked about this as well, but like Bush had his FISA. That's right, because you explained the acronym FISA to me. But he had that whole FISA court wiretapping scandal. Bush did in around 2005, and so again, we elected Barack Obama to not be that, and then it turns out that he's sitting on top of one of the largest surveillance states we have ever seen, and then he gets on TV and says, you know, same thing about Benghazi, right? He said the exact same thing. He said, well, I found out about it like you all on the news. Bullshit. No, you didn't. You're the president. Are you serious?
But first of all, there was evidence that he did not learn about it for the first time on the news in email correspondence. I forget exactly which. But can you imagine? Great. It was an achievement. That administration successfully brought back slavery to Libya. And nobody talks about it.
No.
Because when you have it's the incestuous relationship of media and government that I have since discovered in Canada, since taking my red pills in every orifice of my body. But
the red suppository.
Now, you're in a community where wrong think is an expellable offense. Whereas you talk about these things.
Can I interrupt real quick? Because going back to Obama. Yeah. So the industry, people think Hollywood is bad. It's 10 times more concentrated in New York, in the New York art scene, the New York theater community, right? So I would talk about Barack Obama. And again, my criticisms were coming from the left, right? from left-wing thinkers, left-wing commentators, and yet people would say, are you a Republican? So I mean, I was after Trump was elected, I was doing a concert and I was rehearsing, we're on a break, and I made a joke about Joe Biden and his lack of, let's say, mental acuity, and because I'm still old enough to remember when Joe Biden could finish sentences, and I made a joke about him, and then this other actor launched into this sort of rant, and then he goes, and then these brain dead independents. Now at that point, I had deregistered from the Democratic Party because I was like, fuck, F these people. They don't align with my values. Because again, going back to my show in Connecticut, the night before Trump was elected, I'm pacing around the apartment that I was staying in at the time, and I was kind of stoned, but I had this epiphany where I said, "Oh my God, if you are a Black individual, especially a Black man, and you are actually self-possessed, self-actualized, self-confident, you are happy with your lot in life and pleased with yourself, the Democrats have no use for you. Left-wing people, that the far left is hostile toward you. They want nothing to do with you." And once I had that realization, that was sort of another sort of step off the precipice where I was like, and eventually I think next summer was when I deregistered from the party, because I was like, I was like, I can't. But this person said, then there's these actors like, then there's these brain dead independents. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on now. This man is indirectly calling me, because he didn't know my politics really. Because again, at this point, I learned to shut my mouth for the sake of my career. But this man is insulting me indirectly for being an independent, for not just blindly swallowing whatever the news and the Democrats say. How on earth? These people are so ridiculous, but the point is they're so hostile to any even centrist or moderate ideas or independent ideas that most people just say, I'm just gonna, I have a friend who's working right now, bless her heart, I love her to death, but I see her towing the line all the time. And I'm like, look, because part of our job, right, it's ironic, but we are playing different characters. But the thing is, you're bringing all of yourself to the character. There's a great teacher named Uta Hagen, one of the classic teachers, who said, it's not about losing yourself in the character. It's about finding yourself in the character, because we all have a shared human experience. So if I'm playing Hamlet, and I have all these feelings about my uncle murdering my father and marrying my mother. Well, I find whatever Clifton feels about that, my deepest feelings about that, and I use it in service of the character. But the thing is, you have to be in touch with yourself. You have to be able to access those parts of yourself. And the thing is, if you're lying to yourself every single day in rehearsal studios, or you're on set, and you're not being honest about your opinions, or about what you really think and who you really are, that begins to corrode your soul after a while. That's going to infringe on your artistic spirit and your ability to really tap into the deepest parts of yourself and really be creative. And I think that's, thinking out loud, I think that's one of the reasons why we don't really see greats anymore, like the James Earl Joneses or Laurence Olivier's, Denzel Washington. Like there's a cutoff point, because people lie to themselves so frequently now for the sake of maintaining a career and being a part of the status quo. And I know I cut you off and went on a rant there, but just to make the point about it's so the sort of environment that you have to be in, and Trump's election made it 10 times worse.
Because it's an amazing thing. Like, I was not even 2014 with Gamergate. I was so unaware. All I knew of it were the headlines of misogyny in
Sexism.
The gaming. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
2016, I started getting interested because I saw Trump get elected. It was, first of all, the debate season was unlike anything we've ever seen before or after. And then I really started having my red pill, where I think I once voted liberal in my life. I know that I voted liberal, but I don't think it was Trudeau. I think it was before then. I'm trying to think of who it was. But at some point, Clifton, this is the crux of our evening, but there's other stuff to get into. At some point, you say you were a registered Democrat, you voted Obama, you're from a community, a demographic, which traditionally, I believe, among the Black community, it's like 80+%. Jewish 90%. It's 90%. Jewish community, it's 70 some odd percent. And I never understood how the Democrats or the liberals in Canada created this world where minorities who typically don't get well served by them, except for the exclusive few, tend to vote for them en masse. But where if you did it, you were expelled, excommunicated. You were called an anti-Semite if you voted for Trump or if you supported Trump. You were called you ain't black if you didn't vote for Biden. And I'm trying to. So this was my awakening as well. But you're in an industry. When do you formally snap and say, and I'm going to swear again, fuck it, I'm going to tell you all what I think. And now, what happens the moment you do that? Because if you don't get formally excommunicated, you certainly get indirectly excommunicated. Am I wrong, or is that sort of might have what happened?
Well, it may help transition into the latter part of our discussion, because honestly, the pandemic turned everything around, and so I was in New York City. Obviously that's where I lived but from January to March of 2020, I was full COVIDian. While everyone else was focusing on Donald Trump's first impeachment, I was somebody who, I'm masking up and gloving and wearing gloves in the subway. I'm getting ridiculed by people in the street. That's one of the great things about New York. There's so many people, and people will just, I remember I walked past one guy, I'm wearing a mask. It's like dusk. I'm heading into the subway. I walked past him, and he was like, and I'm one of maybe 1% of people who's wearing a mask outside, outside of like the East Asian population. And this guy just goes, the people wearing the mask, they must be the ones that got it.
First of all, applying the logic of wearing masks, that does make sense, because in Japan, in Asia, where they wear the masks, typically it was the people who were themselves sick, and they wore it not out of fear, but rather out of respect to protect. We got it all backwards here, but sorry, I cut you off there.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? Like, if you are sick and you can't stay home and you're showing symptoms, then there is a logic to wearing a mask. You know what I mean? Like you have to, there is a fairness that you could say about that. But so I'm in New York, and I and I'm like, dude, we're all, why is no one doing anything? Something is really wrong. We're all gonna die. I'm annoying my friends with like all these statistics and, trying to warn them to watch out for what's coming. But at that point, everybody else was like, it's just the flu, bro. I'm talking to my therapist. That's such a New York thing to say. I'm talking to my therapist about this. I'm in her office in January with gloves on, not touching handles, the elevator buttons. I'm using a pencil to push the buttons. You know what I mean?
By the way, they came out with a wand product for poking and pulling. I mean, no joke, Clifton. You were ahead of the game, but yeah.
Yeah. So, so it's funny to me when people are like, well, you're a denier. Yeah, I'm like, no. I was ahead of the game way before you were, buddy. But basically there came a point where, like I said, I have a younger brother, and he's in Atlanta. And he said, I see things are getting really bad up there. So if you need a place to, of refuge, you can come down here. And I was like, I thought about that. And so Andrew Cuomo gave a press conference where this reporter had the nerve, the temerity, to ask about the economic ramifications of protracted lockdowns. Imagine that, Mr. Frei. Why would anyone ask that question? And so Cuomo launches into this ridiculous diatribe. Death is worse than a bad economy. You want to work? You want to get a job? Go get a job as an essential worker, as if you could turn in an application, and become a doctor or a mechanic or something like the next week.
And if I can pause you there, and as if to suggest that a 1% increase in the unemployment rate does not have a direct correlation on decrease of life expectancy, as if that's also not the case. And now we know the stats as to the decrease of life expectancy by demographic, from the Black population to the Caucasian population, as if we haven't seen a direct correlation. But yeah, sorry. So
it was so frustrating, because I to this day I can't describe the feeling I had. It was right like in sort of around like my gut, solar plexus kind of area. It was a mix of terror and just rage, and I don't know what it was, but maybe it was my sixth sense or something kicking in, because I said to myself, "Oh my God, this man will do anything. This man will justify any action that he takes because of his rigid moral framework. If it saves one life, that was his
One
thing.
life
If
from COVID. That's the one
Which he
life from
failed
COVID.
anyway, because he's literally tweeting out every day people dying. So like it's not even working, mother. But like, you know, you dumbass. But I said, that is when I said I have to leave. So early June, I got out, and thank God I did, because I mean, I call it the city formerly known as New York now. But so then when I got to Atlanta, first of all, I went from a city where, you know, I make this joke where in 1919 I would have to step off the sidewalk to let white women pass, but for COVID-19, the white women would step off the sidewalk to avoid me, and you know. But then you go down to Atlanta, and it's as if it's almost normal. Bars are open, nightclubs are open, people are hanging out in the park, you know, just playing, having cookouts like nothing is happening. I'm sharing joints with my brother's musician friends. You know what I mean? Like it's like nothing is going on. And so that was for me, you know, one kind of antenna popping moment. But what happened shortly after that was that George Floyd was killed, and all of these, you know, all the unrest started, and I began getting these emails from like aggrieved white women who had worked with me in the past, who were saying things like, you know, I'm so sorry about all that you're going through. However, I can be an ally, as if to say that. To me, it read as, I'm sorry that you're Black, and that my life is so much better than
Well,
yours because I'm white.
I mean,
And
that's
then I
what
got
happens.
the
Like you get a message like that, and it does nothing but it does nothing but anger you. I presume, if I'm projecting too much, if I get that type of tokenizing, that type of belittling denigration, I have nothing but anger and animosity towards the person who thinks that they are placating me by appealing to my identity as opposed to me as a human. Am I projecting, or am I wrong? Or am I right?
well, here's the thing, because from those particular people, I was like, the fuck y'all talking about, you know? but but you know, I you know, one of them I'm still in contact with today, actually. But you know, but because of our relationship, and like I know who they are. I know they're coming from a good place. Like and again, you know, I know they're trapped in that sort of media machine, and you know, this delusional kind of pseudo reality. You know, I think James Lindsay calls it a pseudo reality. I call it a constructed reality, created by the press and by their revered politicians. So that didn't really bother me that much. But then I began to get emails from um, institutions that theaters where I'd worked previously, and had wonderful times there. And it just went, they went full on anti-racist. And just, you know, we realized that now we need to be better and increase our diversity, yada yada yada. And talking about like white theater spaces. White theater spaces is not a term I heard before 2020. Like I've never walked into a rehearsal studio or walked onto a set and been like, God damn, it's white up in here. I've never done that in my life. You know what I mean? And the
I just like
irony
the
of it
fact
is,
I like the fact that you said white, because that fits in with my Whitmer and why.
well,
Yes, right.
well,
I love it, but I was okay. No,
we got well,
interrupt you.
we both appreciate language, Mr.
I
Frei.
appreciate Stewie Griffin. That's where.
Cool whip, cool whip. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
but the irony of it is, you know, I've been encouraged, at least until recently, I've been encouraged every step of the way, from when I first stepped foot on stage at 16 years old, by by white colleagues, Black colleagues. Everyone was like, dude, if you work hard, you will be successful at this. On top of that, there's a practice called non-traditional casting. Now, when it goes awry, there was a movie recently that came out where a Black woman was cast as Anne Boleyn, and people were like, "What is this?" That's when it kind of goes too far. But essentially, what it means is that you are cast in roles that would traditionally be played by a white actor. And I built a career. So, I mean, I would say that in many times I've been a diversity hire, which is its own sort of, you know, psychological thing.
If I can
But
pause you there,
yeah,
do they do that hiring to test the skill of the actor, or do they do it to meet
no,
quotas? Like, is it a challenge to play something in 16th century England, when by and large they would be white people doing it. So is
No,
it to test the
no.
actor, or is it to fill a quota?
No. So early on in my career, I had a young Vietnamese actress who had been around longer than I had. She said, "Clifton, look, you're either going to be cast because of your race or in spite of it," and that has mostly borne out to be true. So what I mean is that people like me are cast not because I have, decades of experience on stage and on camera, not because I went to one of the top three, I think, best conservatories. Maybe Juilliard is like on the same level. It's like NYU where I went, and then Yale and Juilliard. Those are the top three, the big three. Not because I went there. Uh, hey, what's up?
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna put a dog upstairs because he's gonna fall down the stairs. Hold on.
Oh gosh. Well, hi everybody. My name is Clifton Duncan. Ask me. Don't ask me anything. Don't do that. But I hope everyone's well.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the blind dog makes his way up the stairs, and he occasionally falls down. So I have to grab him when he gets there. Sorry,
well, that's very considerate of you. But yeah, the point that I was making is that essentially, people like me often get cast not based on skill or not because, hey, it's a challenge. It's we are cast in order to assuage the white guilt of the people producing the show or directing the show. And which is insulting to me because I'm like, okay, well, I have the training in the background. I can do Shakespeare. I can, and the thing is, if you can do Shakespeare, if you can work your way through Hamlet or some of his later plays like Cymbeline, which is just a weird fucking play, then if you audition for like a lawyer or a doctor, that jargon rolls right off the tongue. You know how to activate it. You know how to make it interesting, compelling, because you have the experience of working with complex language already. So I have all these skill sets. I have the singing voice. I have all of these assets, but it doesn't matter because these people are looking to say, well, we need more brown people in our show. There's a Broadway show called Waitress, which unfortunately is closed prematurely thanks to these COVID protocols. And there was a point where one of the male lead, the romantic lead in the show, they were looking for a replacement, and my manager was friends with one of the women who was playing the lead in the show at that time, and with booming with pride, my manager related the story about how this actress said, "You know what? Why don't we give this part to a black guy? As in it's time." And so that's the only reason that I was brought in, not because of, my abilities, not because of my experience or what I would bring to the role, a mix of fire and charm and vulnerability or whatever, warmth and a great singing voice, intellect. It's just, oh, he's black. And so that kind of a thing erodes your soul. So fast forwarding to 2020 and all the unrest, and I'm getting these emails from institutions where I work, and including our unions, right? The SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild, and Actors Equity Association, which is the theater for the Union for Theater Actors, and they're sending these emails about racial justice, like they're becoming political institutions now, and and I'm thinking to myself, like, I have never once needed to be included. And the irony is that I was always overlooked. No one ever paid attention to me, and I never asked for any sort of acclaim or accolades just for being a black guy doing stuff. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only black male that was on Broadway doing the kind of British comedy that I was doing. Never asked for any special recognition. I just wanted to work. I never got into acting to be some kind of activist. It was one of the few things I was good at. And I just happened to have a lot of great assets that I could use that really worked well for me. And that's where, so that's where I put my energy. And it worked out really well for me, or was working really well for me. And so all this is a broad way to say that I was removed from the industry because everything was shut down. And when all the unrest began, I saw how quickly, I was very alarmed at how swiftly and rapidly the sort of anti-racist attitude was sweeping the industry. I mean, they were going full on. We're going to make these changes. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I had a Twitter account before that, and I would just post like, work stuff because, again, I'm keeping my own true thoughts private for the sake of my career. But now there is no career because there's nothing going on. But on top of that, I got sick and tired of lying to myself and by extension lying to everyone else. And I was very, very concerned by the direction things were going in. And so I said, you know what? Forget it, man. I'm gonna just start saying what I really think about this stuff. Because again, I told you before, I can't shut up about this stuff. I don't know
Well, first
why.
of all, how did we meet on Twitter?
I
Do you
think
recall?
no, I think we just sort of, we were saying
The
kind of the
algorithm.
same things,
Well,
and
that's it.
we just found each other.
The algorithm introduced us, and so thank you, Twitterverse, for an algorithm that works for some things but not for others.
Yeah, right. The
But
one
so,
good thing it did.
like you said, it corrodes the soul. That's a euphemism for the black pill, the proverbial black pill that some of us say. You're in an industry where you've worked your entire life. You take care of yourself. You study. You practice. You train you hone your skills as an artist, and then it comes down to, hey, we need a black person. Let's just do that. Hey, we need a woman for this part. And so let's if it's not bypassing skill, let's at least create a situation where the individual is going to say, did I get this because I'm good at it, or did I get this because they've tokenized me to fill a checkbox? First of all, is that a fair description? How does it feel? And did you notice this? It's a three-part question. Did you notice this transition evolve over time, or has this always been the case in the arts, in America, in the world, but we've just never really known about it as much?
I'll give you one specific example of where I said where it really upset me. I was doing this. This was when I was like on my upward trajectory, right? So I'd had to leave the Broadway show because due to a back and a wrist injury, which was unfortunate. But I ended up sort of, putting myself on the map with a couple of standout performances at big venues in New York City, or the city formerly known as New York, excuse me. And things really began to take off. And there came a point where so there's a musical adaptation of the novel The Secret Garden, which is a beautiful, beautiful children's novel. And they were looking for an actor to play the lead role of Archibald Craven. And the role was originated on Broadway by Mandy Patinkin. So it was such a great opportunity for me. And they really, really chased after me for this role. Part of the reason is because they'd seen me in a play that goes wrong. So they knew I could do a British accent. But, and then the singing and all that stuff. But, I'm like, guys, I was going to pass on it, because the show, it was going to be a workshop that was supposed, and then the show was going to move to Broadway. That was the plan. And so, if you got cast in the workshop, that means you were going to Broadway. So I was like, great, I get to come back to Broadway. Fantastic. His name is Inigo Montoya.
Yeah. Mandy Patinkin, for anyone who doesn't know, Inigo Montoya from Princess Bride. He was in Chicago Hope, I think. He was in
Homeland as well.
Homeland, yes. And he I think he went off the deep end at some point, but that's a separate issue.
Well, but I mean, he's very intense, but he's a wonderful, wonderful, Juilliard trained actor, just brilliant, brilliant performer. And so, what an honor, right, to step into the shoes of this and put my own stamp on a role that he originated, right? But my back, I herniated a disc, so my back is messed up. I can barely walk. I literally, at the audition and callback, I sat in a chair and just sang because I couldn't do much of anything else. And it wasn't that I did bad work. It was really great because I was so excited by the material and I really invested myself into it. And I got the part, and we're working. And then at a certain point, I had this conversation with the director, and because so for people who don't know the novel, the character of Archibald Craven is a humpback. And one of the interesting things about the novel, which I enjoyed, is that I think one of the underlying themes of the novel is that what you believe about yourself on the inside works its way out, it has a physical manifestation. And so I think the director's concept was interesting in terms of like, you don't really need to do all that much, because I went all like Richard III, now was the winter then, I'm like limping and, and because it was a workshop, we're all kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, it's early stages. But he pulls me aside one day and he's like, you don't really have to do all of that. He goes, I think that at this time, in our world, people would see your skin color as a disability. And I just sort of paused, and I just, because at the same time we had one of the other major roles in the show is a maid, and it was cast with this Black woman who's a dynamic performer herself. And at that moment, and I don't know this for sure, but I said, "Oh my God," because I remember hearing other names that they were considering for the part, which were other Black men, right? And I said, "Wait a minute, am I only here to assuage the guilt of these quote unquote progressives because they got horrified that they have a Black woman playing the maid? So now they need a Black person to play the master of the estate, to kind of balance things out. Is that what's really going on here?" And a lot of joy that I took in the role sort of went out the door for me, because I'm like, okay, well, and again, I never verified any of this. And I had a wonderful time working on the project. We had a lot of great work done in there. But there was that part of me that said, so I'm only here because they needed a nigga to fill the role. That's what they needed to make themselves feel better. That's great. So there's a cynicism that kind of creeps in from time to time.
But has that ever been any different? If that sentiment, has that ever been any different in your life? Like, was there a time in your life where you felt like we've gotten past this nonsense in America? We see each other for people and not for identities. Have you ever felt that way in America, and then have it been reverted to what I think I see it as from Canada today?
No, because, and here's the thing, so I grew up, and this sort of goes back into the theme of transformation that you were talking about. You have to think about the typical. So one of the reasons that a lot of Black Americans vote Democrat, you have a culture and a world in which the athletes that you admire, the comedians that you like, the rappers and singers that you like, the shows you watch, the news you ingest, it's all, and even, even the education that you receive, it all revolves around this one specific worldview, which is heavily biased toward the left. So growing up, I had this same mindset about racism and white America, and how as a Black man, I have a target on my back, and yada, yada, yada. And what this does, going back honestly to the corrosion of the soul, it impacted my work as an artist, because I was so paranoid anytime I did work, because I was like, how am I being perceived by the white audience? How am I being perceived by my Black peers? And Viola Davis has actually talked about this very openly. This sort of attitude is destroying Black artists, because they're not thinking about what can I bring to this role that's unique and human and textured and nuanced and subtle, and it's more about how am I perceived. And all actors, we have to worry about that. But when you're trying to work on a role, I'll give you a prime example, right? So Shakespeare's played The Tempest, one of his later plays, one of his best known plays, played the role of Caliban in Washington, D.C. Caliban is a slave. He's explicitly referred to as a slave. And on top of that, he's called a monster, mooncalf, all kind of derogatory language. And then my costume, I literally had chains on. People can go and look this up, just look up, The Tempest, Clifton Duncan, whatever. And it was, and I had to be the one in the room saying like, no, let's go for it. Let's fling me around the stage, do whatever you have to do, because I knew that the audience would come in with all of this baggage, and I said, I can't worry about any of that. So I'm going to play this role of a slave, and Shakespeare didn't write this part, thinking about colonialism or any of that crap. I just happened to be, I knew the director, and he was gracious enough to cast me in the role. And I was like, oh crap, now I got to play it. And what am I going to do? And I approached the part I said, wait a minute, this guy, he's a human being. He's an abandoned child, and that pain runs, courses through him. So that was a point of view where I began to build my interpretation. And it was just, if I had sat there and worried about what the audience was going to think about me, about how Black people were going to perceive me. And there was one person that complained, because there was one other Black person in the show, Black male, who was playing a noble. So he thinks that other character, he thinks his father is dead, and so now he's the king of Naples. And so this person complained on social media about, like, I can't believe that there's the only black men in this show with speaking roles are playing slaves. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, yeah, my character is a slave. It happens to be one of the most revered roles in Shakespeare's canon, and I'm playing it very well. But on top of that, the other dude is the fucking king of Naples.
No, it's confirmation bias, like selective viewing through the blinders. But there's only one of them, Clifton. There's only one of them, and there were multiple slaves, I presume, in this play.
No,
I don't know how.
It was just one. It was just me.
I don't know how. It's frustrating. I don't know how you get past it. Where I like the idea that you begin to question yourself. Am I here for skill, or am I here to assuage? And then how does that impact you as an artist?
Well, I'll tell you how I got past it really quickly.
No, please. We have time.
Well, I made a decision back in 2007, and there's a story behind that, but I won't get into it. But I said, I refuse to use my race as a crutch for things that happen in my life that I don't like. Or, that was basically it. And once I did that, so I talked about Gamergate being sort of a massive red pill, but many of these changes were kind of small and gradual and internal, where I made that decision. And that's when I began to sort of diverge from, I guess I'll call it like far left or quote unquote progressive. I rarely use that term now without quotation marks, but this because
it's the regressive progressive, and that's the way it has to be quoted.
This is why these labels don't really make that much sense anymore to me, because I say, now it's gotten to the point where I say to be anti-progressive is to actually be progressive at this point, because things have gone so far off the rails. But I said, I can't do it anymore. And once I did that, and I began to focus on the work, because, you asked me how I get out of it. How I get out of it is that, look, I went to the best acting school in the country, one of the best in the world. I built up a body of work that I'm extraordinarily proud of. There is no consistency in terms of the kinds of roles I was playing. I've been well received, well reviewed, gotten great feedback from people I really, really respect. When I was on my way up, I would have award-winning actors, revered performers in the theater tell me, like, you are gorgeous. Like, they're like, why aren't you famous yet? Are you an asshole or something? And like they were just dumbfounded once I began to show what I could do. And that's what I focused on, is that I got to a point where I said, if you don't hire me and put me in your show, that's your problem. You know what I mean? That's your loss. I know what I got. I'm good at what I do. And it might not be right for your show, but but I'm good at what I do. And that's what I rely on. So yeah, you might cast me in this role because you want to fulfill a quota, but I actually have the chops to make it sing, to make it work. So I'll take these white progressives' money. I'll take their awards or whatever, their recognition, and and I'll build on that, because I'm the real deal. And I don't really toot my own horn that much. I don't even talk about my work, or what I do or what I used to do. But I had a teacher who actually told me I could use some more arrogance. So here it is. But it's a reflection of how I tend to just sort of downplay myself. But it's just
arrogance. My theory is that arrogance and confidence are misperceived by the individual based on their own weaknesses.
Right. Right.
Now, but I want to bring one chat up, because I said I would get back to it. It was from Ponton. It's a tough chat, and I don't want to ignore a chat. And Clifton, I'm reading it in real time. It's not censored. It's the actual censored in the chat. Do you think the use of the N-word needs to be addressed at some point in order to put racist rhetoric and thought behind us? It's the only word that can't be used equally, and invokes the idea of racism and old wounds. And it's a wholly legitimate question, and it's a tough one, Clifton. I mean, what do you say?
I don't know. That's the thing. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, either everyone can say it or nobody can say it. And the thing about that is that in Atlanta, which is what they call a chocolate city. It has a 56% black population. Black people say nigga all the time, but they use the a conjugation and not the er, you know. And there's no real rules, but at the same time, I think sort of gradually it's losing its potency. I notice that people use the word like on the internet for trolling, not because they're being mean, but because they know that it will get a rise out of people, and it's like they're using it ironically, and it makes me uncomfortable. But I'm just like, you know. But then there was one night I was in the subway in the city formerly known as New York, and there was a group of kids, mixed race, you know, about 5 or 6, and there was this white kid who just was like saying nigga this and nigga that, but his black friends were laughing, and you know, but then at the same time, you know, the Dominican kids would say it, you know, Latinos say the word all the time. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think I don't know, man. It's just
my answer to the question that was not asked to me is that it would. First of all, I will never use the word. Period. I think there's a few words out there that I think are never contextually appropriate. You know, unless the context, for whatever the reason. This word, it's a word that it's contextually determined. So like you take a movie like Lonely Island, Pop Star, Keep On Keeping On, where Maya Rudolph at one point uses the N-word, and they make the joke that, oh, she used it with the hard R. And it was like, contextually, it was hilarious in the movie. You go to movies like Spaceballs or Blazing Saddles, where it was used contextually to illustrate a point. Mm-hmm. And then you go to rap songs where it's used contextually, even with I'm thinking non-black rap, like white people using it. It's contextual. Is it used to be derogatory, or is it used to make is it used to be not derogatory but inclusive? It's a very weird thing, but it's so risky. You just can never do it. Period.
Well, it's weird because I mean this is a decades old thing where black people use it to refer to each other and themselves. But I will say in the hip hop world, that is a taboo. Even like in like battle rap, you know, circles where you're not your whole job is to destroy your opponent lyrically. And you'll see guys make race jokes about like, you know, Arabs, Jews, you know, but very few people will make black jokes. They won't, and no one says the N-word. No one's the N-word. I said that. I said well, that's the time. But that's the thing. Nope. It's weird, isn't it? And even when someone says that, when someone says like the N-word, I say to myself, okay,
what did you just say?
I know what you're saying.
It's like YouTube doesn't allow you don't allow the N-word on YouTube, but just put in a little asterisk for the I. Everyone knows what you're saying, so it just becomes contextual. Are you using it to denigrate, to insult, to belittle, demean, or is it in some way contextually appropriate, if for lack of a better word? I'm going to get canceled for that clip right there. It's a crazy thing. Like, what other word? I can think of the C word, like CUNT, referring to a woman in an insulting way. But think of a British crime movie. Dude, if I don't hear the word every second word, it's not a British crime movie.
Well, you know what? You know what I noticed? That women will call each other bitch, and it'll be a term of endearment. And also, this is a word that I don't use, but gays sometimes will call each other the F word, and that's a word that makes me uncomfortable. But I will say, I never hear Jews use the K word with each other. Oddly enough.
Well, first of all, I don't think it has the baggage. I don't think most people know about it. By the way, the word is Kike, and the theory of the history is it's Kika, which apparently means circle in German. And when Jews came over, they couldn't sign, so they put a circle for the name. I don't know if that's true. Nor do I know if WAP for Italians is for without papers. That's the historical explanation.
I didn't know that.
But like, I've heard the W word for Italians in movies. Nobody uses the K word because it's just not it's not evocative. The N word, it's become a tool of divisiveness. But the question is this, and this goes full circle, right back to the beginning. Clifton, have you noticed race relations improve or deteriorate, or have they always been the same and it's just sort of a cyclical back and forth and it'll always be this way?
I think it's the worst it's been since I've been alive. Honestly, it's and what is it I guess I should have noticed something after we elected a blackish biracial president, and things got worse, and then Trump got into office, and so here's a weird thing, I uh, it feels like a lot of people, the conversations that I have, it seems like 2010 seems to be a turning point for a lot of people, where things began to really kind of go off the rails. And I wonder, I think a large part of it has to do with social media and the proliferation of that. But I think also a lot of it has to do with people aging up. Like I think the typical conservative line is that, oh, they're liberals in college or whatever. But then when they go out and get into the real world, then they'll learn and they'll change their politics or whatever. But they didn't they didn't anticipate that these people will grow up and just get jobs. But not just any jobs, jobs in really influential institutions, press, university, entertainment, media, other kinds of media. And I think combined with decades of, I guess, left-wing capture of these institutions, it I don't know, what everyone's getting along. Yeah, I agree with this chat right here. I just
Yeah.
I don't remember this
Right,
sort
it
of
was right on
animus.
point, like as you're talking about it.
Well, but it just I and again, an unusual upbringing, you know what I mean? And here's the thing that I noticed, when I came back to the States, is that depending on where you are, and we were not in a rich area, we were in sort of a working class, almost working poor kind of area in Southeast Virginia. And, so there's a culture that, I don't know if you call it ghetto culture or whatever. Like there's sort of this weird culture that kind of warps a lot of Black Americans, in these communities. And let me back up a little bit. I think that part of what's difficult is that these ideas, a sort of left-wing, I'll steal Thomas Sowell's ideology, terminology, this left-wing vision of the world is taken as axiomatic by people. And again, you have this small cluster of people in these institutions, press, celebrities, intelligentsia, what have you, who espouse this worldview. But it's not necessarily tied to politics. It's just the way that it is. So there's this insidious indoctrination that happens. Whereas a Black person, you are told pretty much from the time you leave your mom's vagina that you have a target on your back and that, the world is out to get you. Actually, I had an ex-girlfriend kind of break me out of the spell. And she said, Clifton, not everyone's out to get you. And when she said that, I got triggered because I was like, man, you don't understand. And she was Japanese American. So to see her kind of deal with some similar issues was interesting. But once she said that to me, and it really kind of opened me up in a huge way. And once I left, I got rid of that baggage. That was a whole different. I mean, even my work got better, in my opinion. That's what I played Caliban after I had that sort of revelation. This is also on top of this idea of, like, I'm not going to use my race as a crutch, right? I want that for all Black people. I want that for all Black Americans, to be freed from what really is a subservient position. When you live your life for seeking the validation of white people, because that's really what's going on. What the Black left, or the woke left, whatever you want to call them, is pushing is this. It's weaponized insecurity. They're taking advantage of Black grievance, and they're using it and saying, and all the language is about, like, oh, well, white privilege this and white people that. I'm like, I tell white people today, I don't care what you think about me. You could think whatever you want about me. I don't care about white people. I care about myself. And once you have that sort of that worldview, honestly, where you say, like, whatever, then you become invisible to the Democrats. You become an enemy of the left. You become, as what Nicole Hannah-Jones says, you're not politically Black anymore. You become a Larry Elder, where you're like the Black face of white supremacy. And I just don't remember any of this kind of. And there's always been this divide in Black American communities, right, where if you think a certain way, then you are acting white. I experienced this as a child. So even though I think it's worse now, but even as a child, if you speak a certain way, if you carry yourself a certain way, you are accused of acting white. So it's not only that you're a nerd, it's that you're not even who you are. And again, and the weird thing about it, it's not white people doing this. It's other Black people doing it to themselves. There was one day, I was about 14, and for whatever reason, we're standing on a corner because the bus for school hadn't come. And I'm there, with my backpack, what's going on? And this kid standing next to me in the neighborhood, smoking a Black and Mild. And he looks me up and down and he's like, "You one of the smart ones, ain't you?" And at the time I said to myself, "Oh, here we go. He's calling me a nerd. He's going to make fun of me and da 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 da." But then I thought about it as an adult and I said, wait a minute. How tragic is that? He's differentiating himself from me. He's calling himself one of the not smart ones. And sort of underneath all of that is this coded language of, I'm not that. You know what I mean? Like I'm not really being that clear about it, but there's this divide of like, if you behave a certain way, if you carry yourself a certain way, then you're acting white. It's weird. I know I went on like a lot of different tangents there. I didn't really answer your question specifically.
But there are a lot of different tangents. And then the other tangent to go after, which will inculpate, the other, is the members of the community who actually feel that way. Do they feel that way because of indoctrination from another demographic, from another industry, from the rap industry, which says, all right, you're cool if you're not this, and you're not cool if you are this. And then the question is, do members of communities become indoctrinated by forces beyond their control, or forces beyond their industry, to actually believe this as, core principles to their ethnic identity? And then it leads into an entirely different, set of questions. I don't even know where to go with that. I mean, the one thing, the one question, the one reflex I have is, once you begin to view the world through these identity politics blinders, everything and anything that happens to you because of those ethnic identity politics issues. See color, you're racist. Don't see color, you're racist. Something happens to you, it's because of racism. Something doesn't happen to you, it's because of racism. And so the question is, in your experience, in your life, like, who's promoting it? How do you get past it? And how does a community actually heal from it to move forward, as opposed to just being kept in those invisible shackles?
Well, it's very, very, very complex. On one hand, part of it is what I think is an understandable reaction to American history. There is a very, very strong need among a lot of Black people to say, we need to hold on to our heritage and protect who we are and what we represent, whatever that may be, because we cannot again be in a position where we feel inferior. And so on one hand, there is, I think, an understandable desire to not let the sins of the past repeat themselves and to not be taken advantage of. And so there is that. And then when you talk about hip hop culture, I mean, I used to be very deeply into it and very excited by it. There's some positive things about it, and it's a very diverse genre with a lot of different kind of voices and people in it, but there's also some obviously negative aspects about that. One of the positive things about it is this idea of self-actualization, speaking your mind, being defiant. But what I've noticed recently is that like I'll go watch battle rap, and I'm starting to hear like battle rappers talking about white privilege. And like there's this one really, really fascinating battle. It's got almost, I'm sure it has over 10 million views at this point, but there was a rapper there's this Russian rapper and then another guy, and I can't think of who it was, but
I'm trying to look it up right now as you say it. So,
but this Russian rapper, it's this huge international event. It was pretty spectacular, but this Russian rapper is talking about like red pill kind of stuff. He's referencing like Paul Joseph Watson. And I noticed the audience, which is like, I think like sort of Western, North American or whatever. I think it's in Canada. They're not responding because they're not getting the references. But when the other rapper starts talking about, racism and oppression, these sort of typical left-wing points of view, then people sort of get it. And so the irony is that even within this culture, which which prides itself on defiance and being unique, finding your own voice. KRS-One, he talks about knowledge all the time. Like, there's the 4 elements of hip hop. I think it's like DJing, breakdancing, rapping. Oh no, I'm messing it up. It's like DJing, breakdancing, rapping, graffiti. And then, some people say that there's a 5th element, which is like knowledge. And even within that, it's a knowledge, but within a very, very specific sort of lane, which is a left-wing sort of lane. And again, these guys are all watching like CNN and like Occupy Democrats and reading the Huffington Post. It's very clear. So there's this weird sort of thing where I guess it's a combination of Black America really trying to assert itself and not and protect itself, but also sort of falling prey to this indoctrination from the education system, from the entertainment, so it's the sort of this feedback loop where this sort of left-wing view of viewing the world is taken as truth. Mm-hmm. And anything outside of that, no one knows who Thomas Sowell is. You know what I mean? Or Walter.
And by the way, and if some of them do, he's a race trading, a race trader. What's the word? Extremist. It's the way it works.
He's an Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious to me because, if you actually read the novel, it's like, well, Uncle Tom sacrificed himself to save the Black people that he loved. So I don't, you can go down that route if you want to, but
no, I've seen the way anyone who deviates has been demonized by the mainstream media. And I won't use the word. That's another word that I will just never use because.
Oh, coon?
No, Uncle UT. I won't use although there are people who have that last name, so you have to use it every now and again. But Clifton, before we wind this up, I want to bring this one up, which says, Mr. Duncan, Polish U.S. Army vet here. I noticed GIs who lived abroad had more rounded worldview. Would you say that living in Europe shaped your perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I had, again, my life doesn't really make sense, but I just had a really unusual upbringing. So from the ages of 8 to 10, I'm going to school. It's on a military base, and there's like a NATO headquarters like near my school. But my barber, I think, was like this Flemish ginger guy. I had friends who were Danish and spoke multiple languages. One of my close friends was from Turkey. From Greece. I had classmates from Turkey. So I literally had colleagues from all over the world that I interacted with, and I think that really helped shape my views and made me more open-minded because I'm just around all different kinds of people, and a lot of people in America just don't get that kind of exposure to different cultures. And it was just a really great time. And I totally think that it helped expand my worldview in a lot of ways. Also, I think because I didn't grow up privileged, I just had more relationships with like sort of common sense, salt of the earth people. And Hampton Roads is the area where I grew up in, Southeast Virginia. There's like where I live, there's a bunch of military down there. There's a shipyard down there. So like lots of blue collar kind of stuff going on down there. You go uptown. Yeah. That's where the sort of the richer area is. But, that's not where I was. There's like a ditch, a few houses down from where we live. We called my area the Creek because, they kind of called it that. And then like a couple of blocks away, there was like these nice houses, on near the waterfront. So, I've always been someone who has, I would go home to this neighborhood, but then I was taking like AP classes, accelerated classes, where I'd be one of the few minorities in there. But then all my close friends were, the Black kids from the neighborhood. So I'm always sort of been between two worlds. That sort of trend has continued into my adulthood. It's just, it's very strange, but yeah, I think part of it is just I'm more open-minded because I've just had broader range of experience.
It's fantastic. And I'm going to end it with this before I ask you one last question. Mike Riendo in French means nothing but water. Many of the political left are so entranced by the beauty of their vision that they cannot see the ugly reality they are creating in the real world. Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, I think someone tweeted that out today, as a matter of fact.
It's Sowell's he's a modern day philosopher in as much as they can be. And there's a bunch, but it's not to pick on Sowell. Clifton, I don't want to get into the finances of what you're doing right now. We know what's going on with the acting world, the Hollywood world, and the repercussions of what you're making as a life decision by expressing yourself freely and liberatingly. Where can anybody who wants to support you, follow you, and help you in this journey? Where can they find you and support you?
Well, first of all, thank you in advance for those who choose to do so. You can find my Twitter. It's at Clifton A. Duncan. I joke I'm a mediocre Twitter personality. I've achieved more prominence as a mediocre Twitter personality than I ever did as an actor. But you know, there's you can tip me via my Twitter account. I also have a YouTube channel called Clifton Duncan Entertainment. Right now, it's primarily the uploads there are the Clifton Duncan podcast, which there's no real, it's like the worst rollout ever. There's no like real set time, but I have a lot of great content up there. I have a lot of great guests coming up, as well as the one I'm talking to right now, which I've already spoken to. But you can go find me there, subscribe, share my videos. It's really more focused on we talk about culture war this and culture war that, and it mainly revolves around politics. And the only time we talk about art and artists is when we complain about them and how they're too woke. So what I'm trying to do now, and I want to put more performance-based content because that's my wheelhouse, and that's where I want to go. And it would be great for me if you all would support me, because I can hire musicians and videographers and really strut my stuff. I also have a Substack called Musings from the Apocalypse, which I update every once in a while with my thoughts. And I think that's pretty much. I mean, I'm on Instagram as well, Clifton Duncan Online. So that's sort of my. I gotta get better at talking about myself.
It's fantastic. I don't want you to sell yourself short. I genuinely think the reason why people succeed on Twitter, the black hole, the cesspool of the internet, if you can thrive there, it's one of two reasons. It's either through the sheer toxicity of your posts or the sheer honesty of your posts. And Duncan, Clifton, I'm sorry, I'm calling your last name. I've been following you enough to know you have amassed a following there, not because of superficiality and not because of garbage, because we didn't even get into the COVID stuff, but
I know
you got there because you are speaking a truth that is a truth that resonates with a lot of people. And it's a beautiful thing. So Clifton A. Duncan on Twitter. We're going to get you on Locals. I'm going to get you on Locals after this stream. But
yeah, please help me out with that, because I have no idea
what's going on. That's a totally separate issue.
Yeah.
The people need to hear you, and they need to hear your voice. And it's an amazing thing. I said, like, you are a, what do you call it? A dissenting liberal. I asked Dershowitz the same question when he came on. How long do you call yourself a liberal before you realize either you are no longer liberal or the party no longer considers you liberal? It doesn't matter. You speak some truth, you make some sense, and that is a reason for which your voice resonates with people who are listening. Clifton, this was beautiful, and thank you very much. We will do this again, because look, we didn't even get into a lot of the COVID stuff. Probably for the better. I think getting to know a person personally before we get into some of the contemporaneous stuff, it's beautiful. Clifton, I will give you the last word, and just because then I will hit end broadcast. But a word of wisdom, a gem of your life, something you want people to take away from this stream.
Well, the most pressing thing that I can think of is to answer your question directly. I don't know what it means to be a liberal anymore, but I do cling to that label because I feel like it's being destroyed. And what I have learned over the past 2 years, given all the COVID stuff, is that the people that call themselves liberal, the people who call themselves progressive, have proven to all of us that they are not those things whatsoever. And so whatever those people are not is what I value in myself. And I value freedom. I value authenticity. And these people are complete hypocrites who have no principles. So, I'm not saying that that's what it means to be liberal, but whatever that means, hey, doggy, that is, so that's what I am. And whatever these people say they are, that is not what they are. That's what I got.
All right, people. You know where I will put all your links in the pinned comment. But Clifton, stick around. We're going to say our proper goodbyes afterwards. Everyone, that dog. He's already pooped and peed up there. I know he's done it. I can smell it. No, I can't. Clifton, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone in the chat, thank you very much. We have a sidebar tomorrow night with Robert Barnes. Then we got this. We'll see what else happens. Ooh, I might be in a special place on Saturday. Stick around. We'll see what happens. Clifton, thank you. Everyone in the chat, thank you. Peace out, people.